Kiera Sullivan had no idea her worst day would end with a billionaire CEO shutting down his entire afternoon for her. She stood on the shoulder of a winding road just outside Manhattan, soaked from the knees down, her rusted-out Subaru coughing its last breath behind her. The wind whipped her damp curls into her face as she waved at the cars zooming past. No one stopped. Of course no one stopped. She'd left her phone in the bakery of all things after running out with a rush order of wedding cupcakes, only to realize the bride had texted to cancel. Classic. Now she was stranded, phone-less, soaked, and holding a tray of cupcakes no one wanted. The sleek black Bentley pulled over so suddenly she thought it was an accident. The door swung open. "You okay?" the driver asked, stepping out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, early 30s maybe. His dark gray suit looked like it cost more than her car. She blinked. I'm fine, just car trouble and bad luck." The man glanced at the Subaru, then back at her tray of cupcakes. "You're not fine, you're freezing, get in," he said, already walking to the passenger door. "Seriously." "I don't bite. I'm not leaving you out here," he said, opening the door and looking at her like it wasn't up for debate. Something in his voice made her legs move. Once inside, the warmth of the car wrapped around her like a blanket. The interior smelled like cedar wood and leather. She curled into herself, suddenly aware of how wet and ridiculous she looked. "I'm Kiera," she said, stealing a glance at him. "Yarden Grant," he replied without looking at her, already tapping something into the screen in the front. "I just canceled a meeting," she blinked. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he said. "I wasn't about to leave you standing on the side of the road like that." She stared at him. "Are you always this nice to strangers?" "No," he said, finally looking at her, his eyes a sharp, stormy gray. "Not usually." The driver pulled smoothly back into traffic. Kiera sat in silence, feeling like she'd just landed in the middle of someone else's life. The inside of the car was absurd hand-stitched leather seats, a glowing dashboard that looked like something out of a spaceship, and a champagne cooler between the seats. She glanced at Yarden again. His jaw was tight, his wrist resting on his knee, gold watch gleaming. There was something about him controlled, powerful, like every part of him was constantly calculating. "You really just canceled your meeting?" she asked again, quieter. He shrugged. "It was boring anyway. You don't even know me. I know you were stranded in the rain with a tray of cupcakes and no phone. That was enough." Her heart did a weird little twist. The driver glanced in the mirror. "Where to, sir?" Yarden turned to her. "Where do you need to go?" She blinked again, thrown by the question. "I was supposed to deliver these to a wedding venue in Tribeca, but they canceled last minute. I was just heading home." "Harlem," he nodded at the driver. "Take us to Harlem." "Wait, you don't have to take me all the way. I want to." She opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have the energy to argue. Silence stretched between them again, but not the awkward kind. The air felt warm now, oddly charged. "So," he said, glancing at her tray. "Are those any good?" She cracked a smile. "They're actually amazing. Lavender lemon, want one?" He raised an eyebrow. "I'll trade you a ride for a cupcake." She handed him one. He took a bite, then stopped. "Holy, this is incredible," she grinned. "Told you." He looked at her again. "You make these?" "Yeah, I run a little bakery in Harlem. Sweet K, it's tiny, but it's mine." He nodded slowly. "You're good." Her cheeks warmed. "Thanks." They pulled up in front of her building, a walk-up with peeling paint and a flickering porch light, not exactly the Ritz. She turned to him. "Thanks for the ride and for, saving me from the rain and possible hypothermia." He didn't move. "Can I walk you up?" She blinked. "Seriously?" "Yeah. I've come this far." Upstairs, her apartment was small but cozy, plants in the window, flower dust on the counters, the scent of sugar and vanilla baked into the walls. "Sorry," she muttered, kicking off her shoes. "It's kind of a mess. I like it," he said, stepping inside carefully. He looked so out of place in her kitchen, like he'd been dropped in from another planet. She watched him take it in, the mismatched mugs, the handwritten menu pinned to the fridge. He said, turning toward her, "I don't usually cancel meetings, ever." She folded her arms. "Yeah, I got that vibe." He took a step closer. "But something about you, I don't know, felt right." Her breath caught. "You barely know me." "Then let me fix that." She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. No one had ever looked at her like that before. Like she wasn't just something he'd stumbled on, but something he wanted to keep. He glanced down at her tray. "You still got more of those cupcakes," she laughed. "You planning on buying me out? Might. Or maybe I'll just invest in the whole bakery." She raised an eyebrow. "You're not serious." He stepped closer. "Try me." And just like that, something shifted. The air between them buzzed with something unspoken. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was a question mark, a spark, a maybe. He looked down at her, his voice soft. "Dinner tomorrow?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, dinner sounds good." As he headed back to the door, he paused. "Wear something you don't mind getting spoiled. I don't do cheap," she laughed. Noted. When the door closed behind him, she leaned back against it, heart thudding, her tray of ruined cupcakes still in her hands. She was still shivering, but this time it wasn't from the cold. The restaurant wasn't just upscale, it was a world apart. Kiera stepped out of the town car that had appeared at her curb precisely at 7, the driver greeting her by name and offering his arm like she was royalty. She hadn't even given Yarden her address. He must have remembered the building. She wasn't sure what surprised her more, the effortless reach of his influence or the fact that he'd used it for her. Le Pavillon glowed like a jewel box on the corner of East 52nd, its glass walls refracting the golden glow of chandeliers and candlelight. Inside, the scent of truffle oil and citrus hung in the air, delicate and expensive. A hostess in navy silk escorted her through the dining room without a word, bypassing tables of executives and gallery owners, until they reached a private alcove flanked by orchids and soft lighting. Yarden stood when he saw her. "You clean up well," he said, taking in her soft linen dress and the vintage earrings she'd borrowed from her neighbor downstairs. "You say that like I was a complete disaster yesterday." "I didn't say that," he replied, pulling out her chair. "I thought it." "Slight difference." She laughed as she sat down, easing into the chair's buttery leather. The table was already set with a bottle of chilled wine and 2 glasses, neither of which she could identify. "You always eat like this?" she asked, lifting the glass he handed her. "More often than I should." "I don't actually enjoy it most of the time. It's usually business." "But this," he said, holding her gaze, "is not business." The waiter arrived silently, placing a trio of amuse-bouches in front of them with the kind of reverence reserved for sacred relics. "I have no idea what any of this is," she whispered. "Trust me," he said, slicing a piece of his tartlet and offering it to her on his fork. She froze. "You're feeding me now," he didn't answer. He just waited. She leaned forward, letting him place it gently between her lips. It was rich and bright, something citrusy with a hint of smoked salt. "Okay," she said, swallowing. "That's illegal. No food should taste that good." He leaned back. "You're the one who made lavender lemon cupcakes in a thunderstorm." She tilted her head. "You remember the flavor?" "I remember everything." She didn't know what to do with that. It felt heavy, like a promise, or a warning. Between courses, the conversation shifted, winding its way through unfamiliar territory. "What did you want to be when you were a kid?" she asked, watching him pour her more wine. "A pilot," he said without hesitation. "Used to sneak out and lie on the roof to watch the planes leave JFK." She blinked. "Seriously," he nodded. "I liked the idea of escape, of direction. Knowing exactly where I was going." "What stopped you?" "My father," he said simply. "He inherited a company, I inherited expectations." She stirred her spoon through the soup the waiter had just set down. "Do you ever wish you'd said no, all the time?" he said. "But I was 22 when he had the stroke. It didn't feel like a choice then." She looked up. "You were that young," he nodded. "The board didn't want me. They fought me for a year. I didn't sleep. I just worked. And when I finally got them to stop questioning me, I realized I didn't know who I was anymore. I just knew how to win." She leaned her elbows on the table. "Is that why you pulled over yesterday? Because you were tired of winning?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "No. I pulled over because something told me not to keep driving." Her throat tightened. "I'm not usually spontaneous," he added, "but with you, it didn't feel like a risk." "Maybe you're just a better gambler than you thought," he smiled faintly. "I don't gamble." "Not unless I know the odds." "And what are the odds now?" "I have no idea," he said. That's what makes it interesting. By the time dessert arrived, something involving spun sugar and a violet glaze she couldn't pronounce, she felt like she'd known him for years. But there was still something he hadn't said. Something he kept just out of reach. As he paid the bill, no card, just a quiet word to the waiter, she asked, "Do people always do what you want?" He glanced at her. "Not always. But most people don't make me want things." They stepped outside into the night, the city humming around them. His driver pulled up instantly, but Yarden didn't move. "Walk with me," he said. She hesitated. "In heels, I'll carry you if you need me to. Don't tempt me." They walked silently for a while, past shuttered boutiques and glowing galleries. He didn't reach for her hand, but his shoulder brushed hers every few steps, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. She was used to being the one who gave, who adjusted, but with him, she didn't have to. When they reached the corner of Madison and 60th, he finally stopped. "I want to see where you bake," he said. She blinked. "Now, tomorrow, or the next day, whatever works. I just want to see it." She studied him. "Why? Because I've seen 100 boardrooms and the inside of 1,000 glass towers, but I've never seen someone make something with their hands and put their name on it, and I want to." She felt her heart shift like a door creaking open. "All right," she said. "You can come by, just don't wear anything you'd cry over if it gets frosting on it." He stepped closer, his voice low. "What if I want you to be the one to ruin my shirt?" Her breath hitched. "Then you'd better bring a spare." He took her hand then, finally, and everything around them blurred. When the town car pulled up again, he opened the door for her, but instead of climbing in, she paused. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. "That's good," he murmured, brushing his fingers across hers. "Because I've stopped living to meet expectations." As the car pulled away, she watched him in the rearview mirror until he disappeared into the crowd. A man who could buy anything, but wanted nothing more than a tray of cupcakes and a girl who didn't care what table they were sitting at. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what happened next. The moment Yarden stepped into Suite K, he said nothing. Not a word as he crossed the threshold, not a comment about the cracked tile by the counter or the fact that the place smelled like caramel and ambition. He just stood there, eyes sharp, taking it all in like it was a gallery exhibit curated specifically for him. Kiera wiped her hands on her apron, heart beat louder than the soft jazz playing through the speakers. "I know it's not much," she said carefully. "But it's mine." He moved forward, brushing past the display case filled with raspberry financiers and honey pistachio bars, stopping in front of the chalkboard menu written in her careful cursive. "Why don't you have your own label on the packaging?" he asked, tilting his head. "I haven't gotten to that yet." He turned to her. "You should. Your name should be everywhere in here." She crossed her arms. "It's not that simple. Branding costs money. Designers, printing, sourcing. Right now, I'm still paying off the second oven." He glanced toward the kitchen, where an assistant was piping icing onto mini cakes. "How many people work here?" "3, including me. You run front of house, bake, deliver, and manage inventory." She nodded. "And I mop." He stepped behind the counter without asking and picked up a small almond tart from the cooling tray. "Hey," she said, reaching for it. He took a bite before she could stop him, chewing thoughtfully. "You use cardamom in your crust." Her eyes narrowed. "You can taste that." "I used to work in a kitchen." She blinked. "No way. 3 summers during college. My roommate's dad owned a bistro in Montauk. I was the only intern who didn't quit in the first week." She leaned on the counter, studying him. "So you can cook. I can follow instructions. There's a difference." "Still," she said, watching him steal another tart. "That's unexpected." He shrugged. "You're full of surprises. I figured I'd return the favor." The bell above the door jingled as a customer walked in. Kiera nodded toward the front. "Duty calls." He stepped aside, watching as she greeted the woman, rang her up, and offered a warm sample of the new lemon rosemary shortbread. The entire interaction took less than 3 minutes, but when she turned around, he was still watching her with an unreadable expression. "You're efficient," he said. "I have to be. I can't afford to waste time." He leaned against the counter, arms folded. "What would you do if money wasn't the issue?" She hesitated. "Don't think, just say it," he said. "I'd open a second location, downtown, bigger kitchen." A real espresso machine, and I'd hire someone else to do the books because spreadsheets make me want to scream. His mouth quirked slightly. That's a solid plan. It's a dream, she corrected. I'm not there yet. Maybe you're closer than you think. She raised an eyebrow. You say that like you know something I don't. I know what potential looks like. And I know what happens when people stop treating it like a hobby. She stared at him, unsure whether to be flattered or wary. So what are you saying? You want to invest? He shook his head. No, I want to partner, she blinked. What? I don't want to just throw money at this. I want to help you scale it, grow it, build it out in a way that keeps your name on the door but takes the weight off your shoulders. She backed up a step. That's a lot for someone you've known for less than a week. It's not about how long I've known you, he said, voice low. It's about what I see when I look at you. She crossed her arms. And what exactly do you see? He took a step closer, fingers brushing the edge of the counter. I see someone who built something out of nothing. Someone who doesn't wait for opportunities, she bakes them. She laughed despite herself. That was terrible, he smiled faintly. True, though, she hesitated. I'm not good at letting people help. I'm not good at offering help, I don't mean, he said. So if I'm here, it's because I want to be. Before she could answer, the assistant from the back peeked out. Kiera, the delivery guy's here early. He's asking about the payment. She glanced at Yarden, then back. Be right there. As she disappeared behind the kitchen door, Yarden wandered the small shop. He ran a finger along the edge of the counter, noting the small imperfections, the tiny signs of wear and use. Everything about the place felt lived in, fought for. It was nothing like the sterile boardrooms he spent his days in. By the time she returned, her hair was dusted with flour and her cheeks were flushed. Sorry, she said, brushing her hands together. Things get chaotic back there. He reached into his coat and pulled out a slim envelope. Here, she frowned. What's that? An invitation, for tonight. She took it slowly, opening it with cautious fingers. Inside was a gold card embossed with her name and the words, Annual Grant Initiative Gala. She looked up. This is your company's event. Yes, black tie, very. She narrowed her eyes. Why me? Because I want you there. I won't know anyone. You'll know me. She hesitated again. You realize I don't own a dress that fits that kind of room. He smiled. Already handled. She stared at him. What do you mean handled? There's a car coming at 5. Inside will be a gown, shoes, and anything else you might need. All your size. You can choose not to wear any of it. You can even skip the event. But it's yours to decide. She held the envelope like it was something fragile. Why are you doing this? Because the world I live in needs to see what it looks like when someone walks in without apology. And because I want to be the reason you're seen the way you deserve to be. She looked away, lips pressed tight. I'll be waiting, he said softly, and let the door close behind him. Kiera stood still, the envelope in her hand, the scent of sugar still thick in the air. Part of her wanted to throw it away. The other part, the louder, braver part, wanted to know what it would feel like to walk into a ballroom not as someone's plus one, but as someone worthy of being noticed. She looked at the clock. 4 hours to decide. The moment Kiera stepped into the ballroom, silence bloomed around her. Not because the room stopped, but because the noise faded, at least for her. The cascade of soft violins, the murmur of tailored conversations, the clink of crystal, all of it dulled under the weight of her own breath as she took in the space. The ceiling arched far above, carved with metallic leafwork, and the chandelier glowed with 1,000 candle-like bulbs that bathed everything in warmth. Marble floors stretched out beneath her heels, and the gown, tailored like liquid midnight, moved against her like it had been stitched for her dreams instead of her body. But it wasn't the dress or the grandeur that made her hands tremble. It was Yarden. Standing at the far end of the room, surrounded by a cluster of men in tuxedos and women in floor-length couture, he was no longer the man who had driven her home in the rain or stolen tarts behind her counter. He was the man the world saw, Grant Global's heir, a force who commanded attention without raising his voice, until he saw her. The moment he did, he stepped away from the group, no hesitation. Eyes locked on hers, he crossed the floor as if no one else existed. You came, he said, voice low and steady, her throat tightened. You made it hard to say no. He leaned in just enough to anchor her, his breath brushing the shell of her ear. That was the point. She watched him scan her face, not the dress. Not the earrings or the heels or the careful wave in her hair, just her. Like all of this, the champagne, the chandeliers, the curated illusion meant nothing without her in it. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. She followed him through the crowd, past conversations that slowed as they passed, eyes lingering, whispers trailing behind them. But Yarden didn't look left or right. He walked with the confidence of a man who had nothing to prove and everything to lose. He led her to the edge of a terrace that overlooked the city. The glass doors shut behind them, muffling the gala's sounds. The air outside was crisp, the skyline glittering like a reflection of the stars overhead. "I needed a minute," he said, resting his hands on the railing. "And I wanted you to have one too, before everything starts." "Before what starts?" she asked, stepping beside him. He turned toward her, hands sliding into his pockets. "This night isn't just about donations. We announce new partnerships at this event, initiatives we believe in." "People we believe in," she blinked. "You didn't." "I did. Yarden, I didn't use your name," he said before she could finish. "Not without your say, but I told them about you, about the bakery, about what you're building. I showed them the numbers, the potential. And I told them if they couldn't see it, they weren't looking hard enough." Her breath caught. "You did all that," he nodded once. "And if you say yes, I'm announcing your expansion tonight." She stared at him, stunned. "You're serious?" "This isn't charity, Kiera. You're not a project. You're not something I'm doing to feel good about myself. You're the smartest risk I've ever taken. And I want the world to know what it looks like when someone like you gets the momentum you deserve." Her voice came out hoarse. "Why me?" "Because you make me want to be better. You make me want to build something that matters, not for a board, not for a legacy, but for us." The word hung between them. "Us." She turned away, eyes blinking against the wind. "This is a lot, I know. I don't want to be someone you rescue." "I don't want to rescue you," he said. "I want to stand next to you while you rise. That's the difference." She looked back at him. "Why now?" "Because if I wait any longer, I'll lose the nerve to tell you that I'm not interested in anything less than all of it. The bakery, the chaos, the flower in your hair. I want to wake up knowing you're mine, not because I bought your dreams, but because you chose to share them with me." He stepped closer. "And I'm in love with you, that's why." The words landed like thunder. No preamble, no soft lead-in. Just the truth, dropped between them like a spark waiting to catch. She stared at him, her heart thudding in her chest. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She could see it than the man beneath the suit, the boy who watched planes take off. The son who stepped up when no one believed he could. The man who didn't need her but wanted her anyway. She reached for his hand. "Then don't announce anything yet." His brow furrowed. "You're saying no." "I'm saying wait. I want to do this, but I want to do it right. I want to build it with you, not as a headline, not as a moment, but as a life." He let out a breath, slow and quiet. "You have no idea how much I hoped you'd say that." She smiled then, her fingers tightening in his. "I love you too. And I think I've been falling since the moment you pulled over." He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "Then let's fall all the way." She laughed, the sound catching in the wind. "But maybe not off this terrace." He kissed her, not like a man claiming her, but like one thanking her. For choosing him, for seeing him, for being the only thing in his world he hadn't been able to predict and the only thing he never wanted to lose. Back inside, the gala continued. But when Yarden returned to the mic later that evening, he didn't announce a partnership. He simply raised a glass and said, "Sometimes the best investments aren't the ones that make the most noise. They're the ones that change you." And Kiera, standing at the back of the room, didn't need a spotlight. She already knew she was exactly where she belonged. 2 months later, Sweet Katek's second location opened on the Lower East Side. The walls were pale cream, the logo embossed in gold foil. And in the corner, tucked beside the pastry case, a photo of Kiera and Yarden Flower dusted, laughing and unmistakably in love. Because sometimes, a canceled meeting leads to everything you never knew you needed. And sometimes, a cupcake really does change your life. Kiera stood at the entrance of the new Sweet K downtown, staring up at the gilded lettering above the door. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was only minutes away, and the street outside buzzed with anticipation. Cameramen adjusted their angles, reporters murmured to producers, and a small crowd of loyal customers and curious newcomers pressed against the velvet ropes. Inside, the bakery gleamed with polished brass fixtures and pale marble countertops. Employees bustled behind the counter, prepping samples and ensuring the display cases were stocked with the morning's best. Everything felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's future, but the name on the sign was hers. She adjusted the pearl pin in her hair, fingers trembling slightly, not from nerves, from the weight of it all, the weight of being seen, of being chosen. Of having built something worth showing the world. Yarden appeared beside her just as she was about to step out. He touched her wrist lightly, his tuxedo crisp, his cufflinks glinting beneath the rising sun. "I thought you didn't believe in speeches," she said, eyes scanning the crowd outside. "I don't," he replied, "but I believe in this." She turned to face him. "Do you ever get used to being the center of attention?" "I never wanted to be," he said. "But I figured out that sometimes you have to take the attention so you can redirect it toward something that matters." She exhaled, a slow breath that steadied her. "I still don't know how we got here." "You baked your way here," he said. "I just got out of the way." She tilted her head. "You didn't get out of the way, you stood beside me." His hand found hers. "And I will, as long as you'll let me." The doors opened, and applause broke out as they stepped into the morning light. The ribbon was stretched wide across the gleaming entrance, a pair of oversized golden scissors resting on a tray beside them. The mayor said a few words, a local food critic added a few more, but Kiera barely heard any of it. Her focus was entirely on the man beside her, the one who had shown up when she least expected him and refused to leave when things got real. When they cut the ribbon together, the crowd roared. After the cameras backed off and the press turned to interview a few patrons, Yarden tugged her into the small private garden behind the bakery, a quiet space with climbing ivy, bistro chairs, and a single fountain that gurgled softly in the corner. It had been her one indulgence during the design phase, a place for morning coffee and late-night reflection. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a slim envelope from his inside pocket. She raised an eyebrow. "You and your envelopes." "This one's less public," he said, handing it to her. She opened it and froze. It wasn't a check, it wasn't a contract, it was a deed. "To the space next door," he said softly. "The landlord offered it last week. I told him it was yours if you wanted it." She looked up, stunned. "You're giving me more." "I'm not giving you anything," he said. "I'm offering you the option. Use it or don't. Expand or leave it empty. But I want you to know the future is yours to shape. No pressure, no strings." Tears burned the backs of her eyes. "Why do you keep doing this?" He stepped closer, voice low. "Because I want to build a life with you. And because I've spent years acquiring things that meant nothing. This," he gestured to the bakery, to the garden, to her, "means everything." She dropped the envelope and kissed him. It wasn't a rushed kiss or a desperate one. It was slow and certain, the kind of kiss that said, "I see you." That said, "I'm not afraid anymore." That said, "Stay." When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I'm in," she whispered. "All the way." "Good," he murmured, "because I was going to ask you something." She leaned back, frowning slightly. He dropped to one knee. The world fell away. He didn't pull out a ring, not yet, just held her hand and looked up at her like she was the only person on the planet. "I don't want to propose with diamonds before I propose with time," he said. "So this is my first proposal. Let's live together. Let me wake up to you covered in flour and hair tied back and grumbling about deliveries. Let me be the man who locks up sweet K with you every night." She laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes. Yes to all of it." He stood and pulled her into his arms, her head tucked under his chin, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. The bakery had officially opened, but so had everything else. 16 months later, the wedding took place in the garden behind the original Sweet K in Harlem. The bakery closed for the day, the staff lined the rows with fresh peonies and tiered cakes, and the scent of almond and vanilla filled the air. Kiera wore a sleeveless gown with delicate embroidery, her curls pinned with tiny sugar flowers. Yarden stood waiting beneath the ivy arch, no tie, no nerves, just love. They wrote their own vows. I used to think I had to fight for everything, she said, voice shaking. That I had to prove myself to be worthy, but you showed me that love isn't something we earn, it's something we grow. And I want to grow everything with you. He took her hand. I spent most of my life building walls, he said. Then you walked in and didn't knock, you just stayed, and I realized some things aren't meant to be defended, they're meant to be shared. You're my greatest risk. And my best return. They kissed to the sound of laughter and clapping and the faint chime of bakery bells from inside. Afterward, they danced in the garden under twinkle lights, barefoot on the grass, her head on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around her like a promise. No press, no business talk, no expectations, just them. Later that night, as they curled up in their shared brownstone above the downtown bakery, she watched him pull an old, slightly bent recipe card from his wallet. "You kept that?" she asked, surprised. He held it out. "Your first cupcake recipe, the one I stole when I went back to your place to return your phone. I found it beside your oven." She took it, laughing. "It's got frosting on it." "Exactly how I like my things, a little messy, a lot sweet." She kissed him softly. "You know what I love most about this life?" "What?" "That it's ours." He turned off the light, pulled her close, and whispered against her ear, "Forever."